heard this story a little while ago about Calvin Coolidge, one of our presidents, our former presidents, and back then they would ask all the questions that they wanted to ask, much like today, but I don't think they would ask this question. But it's very interesting that the person comes up to him and they ask him the question because he was just leaving church, and they said, "Hey, what did the preacher talk about?" Now that's a different sermon from a different day, but I don't think anyone's going up to President Biden and asking him what his preacher or his priest is talking about in church. But back then it was important for them to know, and so they go up to him and they're like, "Hey, so what did the preacher talk about?" And he looks at him and just coolly, he talked about sin. And he's like, that's not going to write an article. That's not enough for me to do anything with, so I have to press. And so he presses him. Well, what specifically did he say about sin? And Calvin looks at him. He's against it. And I thought that was a funny story because of the times and the way that we've gone away from those sort of things. But the fact that he just cool and calmly responded, well, he preached about sin and he's against it. I think a lot of us would say we are against sin as Christians. We'd say, I don't like sin. I don't like living in a world of sin. And Jesus came to die for my sin, right? But then what do we mean by sin? Because we often leave that out of sermons. Kind of, if we bring those up in sermons, we kind of sound like the people at the Comic-Con with the signs that say, your sins are sending you to hell, right? And so we often don't talk about those things, and we don't want to talk about those things because those are the ugly things. But we need to talk about those things. We believe in two kinds of sin: original sin and personal sin. Original sin, we inherited sin from our first parents, Adam and Eve. That is what we mean by original sin. There was the fall, and we all inherited the original sin, and necessarily that needed to be taken care of, and that was when Jesus Christ came and took care of it, and we celebrate that on Easter. We just did, and so it's exciting, and we all know that, and I preached about it before, and I don't want to sort of concentrate on that because we concentrate on that a lot. What I want to look at instead is the personal sins that we have. Jesus said once, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." And so in our culture today, I tell you, it's no different, right? We have a tendency to look at everyone else's mistakes. And if we magnify their mistakes enough, then it makes our lives feel better. We're okay now. Like, I'm okay because I'm not as bad as you. Jesus is like, whoa. You can't go around correcting everyone else because you yourself have this giant thing hanging on in your life. And so today, instead of looking at the sin in everyone else's life, the sins of a fallen and broken world, I'd like us to take a closer look at ourselves. At this word personal sin. Because perhaps there is something that we need to take personal responsibility for. Perhaps there's something that we need to own up. Proverbs 29:1 says, "Whoever remains stiff-necked after many rebukes will suddenly be destroyed without remedy." Those who remain stiff-necked, it's like an oxen. When you put the farmer, they put the yoke onto the oxen and they try to wear him out, right? And the animal refuses to wear the yoke. He would sort of move it around. And it's not because the farmer hasn't put in the effort to train the animal. It's because the ox refuses to submit. Always fighting, always stiffening the neck, hardening their back. And they remain that way. Even after much effort, much training, much hard work, the ox remains stiff-necked. And then the farmer would take great work to make sure that they put it on there right and that it didn't rub or cause injury. But when the oxen fought it off, it causes friction and rubbing and damage and injury. And if the oxen continues to fight and harden his neck, the calluses build. And at that point, the ox may not even feel the pressure of the yoke. And he keeps fighting against it. That sounds familiar to some of us. You see, the text today isn't about a mule. It isn't about an oxen. It's about a man. God has put in there, and the farmer has tried hard to train the ox. He has worked it. He's corrected it. He has disciplined it. But in spite of all the training and all the correction, he remains stiff-necked and stubborn. The same thing happens with us people. God tries again and again and again to get our attention. He tries to train us. He tries to let us know, take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle. I am humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my work is easy and my burden is light. And yet we still have this wonderful thing called free will, and so we still fight against it. We can choose to submit to God's guidance and direction for our lives, and He knows the way we should go, and His yoke is easy, His burden is light, and yet we fight against it. We cross our arms, we're stern in our face, we sit back, and we're just like, I'm not going to do it. God, I'm just fine the way I am. I don't want to change. I don't want to give that up. I will not submit. I will not change. I will not do what you want me to do. I do not care if it is sin or not sin. I don't care if it's against your will. I enjoy it too much. Leave me alone. And to be honest, God gives us many, many opportunities to own this stuff. And He keeps coming back. And He keeps working in our lives despite our stubbornness. He comes to us again and again and again and gently trying to work in us. But some of us are unresponsive. Some of us are stiff-necked and stubborn in spite of all the training and correction. Perhaps they've come to the point where they like their little sin, their little stubbornness. Some people have this little secret, right? Only they know it. And it ain't harming anyone else. It's really okay, you know? The truth about little secrets is that people really know. We think they don't know, but they really know. They know more than we let on. And God tried to correct us, but we shook it off. There's many different sermons, there's many different ways. He uses His word, He uses people. But we're still unwilling to submit, unwilling to change, unwilling to respond. And soon there will come a day when we are suddenly destroyed. We become so calloused, our neck, we won't even feel it. In an instant, it's going to be broken. But that's not how we have to be. Listen, we believe that sin is serious business. I mean, so we talk about it as if it's serious business, and we can't hide it under the rug. We can't get rid of it. We can't be stiff-necked about it and say it doesn't exist in our life. We have to own it. We know there will be no sin in heaven. There will be no secrets. We believe in original sin that came from our first parents. But we also believe in these personal sins, these personal things that we need to own. And so you may have sat through many church services, maybe even testified to spiritual victory, but you also may be harboring some stuff. And I think tonight's the night to own that. I think today's the day to don't be that person that becomes stiff-necked. You have a choice right here, right now, to own it. Stop fighting. His yoke is easy. His burden is light. And to understand that verse, you have to understand that He takes most of the burden upon Himself. He already has, matter of fact, took the burden of the entire world on His shoulders. And He carries it even today. So stop fighting. If you're fighting, stop fighting. Own it. Just surrender.